and became a lawyer in 2013. When he was a law student, he drafted White Flag Case and filed it in International Criminal Court in 2011. With a team of activists, he was a youth presenter at the Dublin Tribunal in 2011. He also drafted a lawsuit against the European Union to remove the ban on LTTE in 2014, and the ban was lifted in a short period of time. He co-founded a nonprofit organization, Third Eyes, to help organizations in the legal support for Tamil genocide. As a continuous advocate of Tamil struggle, Rajeev currently works on legal narrative of Tamil genocide. Now let us invite Mr. Rajeev Sreetharan to share his thoughts.
Nandri. Okay. நான் இப்போ கூட இங்கிலீஷ்ல தான் கதைக்க போறேன். So I will be sharing, basically the last 2 years of legal research and also evidence collection, fact finding that we've done with witnesses from the Vanni. And I thought I'd start with one quote because one observation I've made is the truth and narratives coming out of the witnesses is generally not included in the UN iNGO reports. And so these truths should be, shared with the community. If you can go to the first slide. So so I'd like to start with a quote. And again, this is from the witnesses. Pangal ungalakku, aangalinda rattam kadalakku. If you can understand my Tamil, that means the women are for you and the blood of the men is for the ocean. This was basically Gotabaya Rajapaksa's instructions to the Sri Lankan military and Tamil paramilitaries administering the surrender point in the last 2 weeks of May, and just gives an insight to what the mindset of the Sri Lankan state was during that period. I'm going to be talking through about 10 slides with the hope of providing, legal knowledge, legal clarity to explain how the Tamil struggle went from the peace process to genocide from about 2002 to 2009, and then how the Tamil community can participate in a collaborative social justice movement to get from today to a legal proceeding at the ICJ for genocide. So the 3 themes in my presentation today I've written here. The first one is essentially to prevail on a Tamil genocide claim, it's necessary to understand the role of the LTTE terrorism bans. And basically the terrorism bans and the genocide are connected. And just to qualify, when we talk about the LTTE ban, it's not about whether you individually support or oppose the LTTE. It's more after the ban was enacted, did Sri Lanka use these bans as a tool to commit genocide? And so our finding is, in 2009, Sri Lanka did use the Canada-EU LTTE bans as a pretext or proxy to commit Tamil genocide and target essentially all Tamils in the Vanni region. And the third point is based on our fact-finding efforts with witnesses from the Vanni, my estimate is less than 60% of the ground truth is in the UN iNGO reports. And so this is a red flag, because normally when you talk to witnesses, it should reinforce what the dominant narrative is. And so when you see differences between what the witnesses are saying and what was reported, this is a red flag that we need to investigate. If you can go to the second slide. And so this is just a big picture of the no-fire zones. We're looking at Mullaitivu, no-fire zone 1, 2, and 3. If we can go to the next slide. And so I'll just read the statements on the top and talk through this timeline. Again, I'm going to try to explain how the bans and the genocide relate. And so from April 2006 to May 2009, the Canada-EU LTTE bans, they basically relocated the peace process inside the war on terror. And you can see this by, basically when the LTTE bans were enacted, by banning the LTTE, also Norway is banned. Also the peacekeeping operations are banned, right? And so the EU LTTE bans can be viewed as the lead domino in a domino effect that essentially collapsed the peace process, escalated war, and ended in May 2009. The second point, similar to Guantanamo Bay detention facilities, anti-terrorism law can create law-free zones. So this is how, all the waterboarding and, detention and interrogation of enemy combatants was described in Guantanamo Bay right after 9/11. Because there was no litigation of the rights of the combatants, and it was described as a law-free zone. And if you just look at what happened in Vanni between 2006 after the bans to 2009, essentially this was also a law-free zone. And the third point is these no-fire zones. If you look at how they were functionally used, essentially it was just a targeting device to kill Tamils, right, and commit genocide. Now moving on to the timeline. No, if you can go back to the, sorry, yeah, no, just to talk through this. So you can see the US ban was in 97, the UK ban was in 2000, then 9/11 happens, that's in 2001. At the same time, you have the peace process, right? Peace process starts in 2002. Now the US and UK did not use the LTT bans during this period. Even though they applied, they didn't use them. They only decided to use them in 2006 and 2005, 2006. And this was revealed through the WikiLeaks cables. Essentially after the Kadir Garmer assassination in August 2005, the US decided to isolate and punish the LTT. That's language from the State Department cables. And they pushed Canada and EU to ban the LTT in 2006. And so the main takeaway from this timeline is from 2006 forward, everything that happened in Vanni is essentially occurring inside the US war on terror. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. And if I can point your attention to the diagram on the top right, you can see a genocide on the right of a black line. And you can see IHL and CT. IHL stands for International Humanitarian Law, like the laws of war. CT stands for counterterrorism. And there's essentially a question that can be asked is, why is it that the Tamil diaspora is talking about genocide? The State Department will talk about terrorism. The US State Department and UK and different governments will talk about terrorism. And the UN report will talk about international humanitarian law, an armed conflict, but not mention genocide, not mention terrorism. And in international law, there's a concept called harmonization and fragmentation, which the simplest way to describe this is a traffic light analogy. And so, on the road, if you can imagine, there's one traffic light. So, and everyone knows what to do. When the light is green, you go. When the light is red, you stop. This is similar to harmonization in international law because multiple laws converge on one set of clear rules. That's harmonization. Fragmentation is the diagram here. Imagine if a road has 3 traffic lights and the green and red follow different logic. This will create chaos on the road. And the 3 traffic light scenario is essentially what was happening in 2009. Because if green represents killing Tamils is okay, and red represents you can't kill Tamils, these different bodies of law, IHL, counterterrorism, and genocide, they have different logic, and it was unclear which one dominated in 2009. So in IHL, collateral damage is okay, right? In counterterrorism, if the terrorism label is put on a Tamil civilian, post 9/11 state practice says it's okay to kill them. And in genocide, the red light signifies you can't kill a group with intent to destroy the group. The pictures on the bottom just show that, for example, in the IHL lens, if you're attacking combatants and killing civilians, in Vanni, the civilians were Tamil and combatants were Tamil. So if you have systematic collateral damage, ultimately you're just killing Tamil people. That's in the IHL lens. Same thing for counterterrorism. Whoever you label a terrorist and whoever's not a terrorist, who's a civilian, they're both Tamil, right? And so this legal confusion contributed to the violence in Vanni in 2009. If you can go to the next slide. And okay, so this diagram now shows how the bans essentially enabled the genocide. So if we go to 2002, when the peace process started, you essentially had a liberation movement in Sri Lanka, so providing protection to the Tamil civilian population, and the Tamil civilian population like receiving security from the liberation movement. Also during this time, Tamil Eelam as a de facto state was forming. It had multiple institutions from tax to police to courts to finance and all of these things. You also had about 30 iNGOs operating in Vanni, Oxfam, UNDP, Save the Children, World Food Program. So all of these institutions, Tamil Eelam institutions, iNGOs, were all operating in the Vanni region between 2002 and 2006. Now, in 2006, when the Canada-EU bans are enacted, the red box signifies that essentially all those groups can be labeled as terrorism, right? So the civilian, because any contact with LTTE under anti-terrorism laws enables governments to extend the ban to those groups working with the LTTE. And so this is where, when the terrorism ban also covers an entire civilian population, the objectives of genocide and the objectives of counterterrorism, they overlap. They overlap. And the bottom diagram, this essentially tries to explain some of the iNGO reporting about trapped Tamils, liberation operations, hostage operations. The terrorist paradigm in the Middle East is the terrorists are over here, the civilians are over there. And so essentially the UN and iNGOs were using this model in the Vanni when actually it doesn't, factually it doesn't really apply. For example, most of the civilians in Vanni were family of the LTTE combatants. And so the most important picture here is the one in the middle that just shows when the LTTE ban can cover a community, that's when genocide and counterterrorism overlap. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Now, when you look at the UN iNGO reports, what we basically have is we have the diagram on the left where individual crimes are investigated and reported. For example, bombing of hospitals. These are all in the UN reports. Torture, crimes against humanity, human rights abuses. These are all acknowledged in their individual capacity. The genocide lens requires connecting the dots between these separate crimes to see if a state plan emerges. And so that's involved some of our research over the last 2 years. You can go to the next slide. And so the simplest model that we've come up with to essentially explain how genocide occurred in 2009 is the gas chamber model. And so this is a gas chamber in Auschwitz, right? 4 walls, Jews were put inside. Poisonous gas like Zyklon B was injected inside. The gas essentially permeated the space indiscriminately. And by indiscriminately permeating this enclosed space, right, the Nazi regime was targeting Jews as a group, not individually as a group. If you can go to the next slide. And so the simplest way to look at the no-fire zones is this gas chamber model. Once Tamils were inside, they couldn't get out, and they were targeted indiscriminately. So instead of poisonous gas, it was artillery shelling, cluster munitions, airstrikes, indiscriminate rifle fire from 100 meters to 200 meters. And so this was occurring inside each no-fire zones, which were shrinking. Now, at the same time, prior to the declaration of no-fire zone 1, the Sri Lankan government had cut medical supplies, specifically medical supplies required to treat injuries from the weapons it would use. So no blood bags, no IV fluid, no surgical instruments. So cut medical supplies. They also removed doctors. So that means if you were injured in no-fire zone 1, by no-fire zone 3, you could have died due to lack of access to medical care. So cut medical supplies. Food was also cut, for example, milk powder. And cutting milk powder has nothing to do with fighting terrorism, right? That's trying to generate malnutrition in Tamil children. So doctors were removed. Also, UN and iNGOs were removed in around 2006. How that happened was the Sri Lankan army started attacking iNGOs in 2006. By July 2007, the iNGOs withdrew. And what this created was a zero witness war. For those of you who have stayed up to date on the war in Gaza, one of the main differences between Gaza and Vanni is, one, there were no iNGOs in Vanni, and two, there were no iPhones, right? So there's no live video coming out, and it was pretty much a black box. And so far, this gas chamber model seems to be the best legal argument to take forward on the genocide. Okay, if we can go to the, okay, and these are just pictures of the, right, so this is no-fire zone 3. This is a makeshift hospital. This is, again, denial of food, right? So they were attacking cows to deny milk and meat later on. If you can go to the next. And so in our investigations, essentially there's 4 geographic areas relevant to genocide. The first 3 are the red boxes. That's no-fire zone 1, 2, and 3. Now, the 4th one that we found is from the surrender point, like let's say this is, May 14th to May 18th, to let's say June 1st, there's no UN oversight, no iNGO oversight, and the estimate is about 10,000 to 25,000 Tamils missing, right? So from the surrender to down to the Omandai checkpoint in Vavunia, this was pretty much a black box after the end of the war, where many Tamils are missing, and this needs further investigation. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, and this is the last slide in the presentation, but just trying to show everyone a big picture. The Tamil community has never been to the International Court of Justice or International Criminal Court to hold the Sri Lankan state accountable for genocide. And so we are all on a collective learning curve. And the point of this diagram was to try to provide an overview. The way international criminal proceedings are structured is you need to initiate it, and then there's a prosecution. And so in terms of initiating, we have 2 options. The first is ICC, that's International Criminal Court for individual criminal responsibility. So there you would hold Gotabaya Rajapaksa or Mahinda Rajapaksa accountable. And there are 3 avenues to take an ICC case forward. The ICJ, International Court of Justice, this is for state criminal responsibility. There are about 4 avenues to initiate a proceeding like this. Once the proceeding is initiated, the steps are essentially the same. The court figures out, does it have jurisdiction to administer the case? There's investigations, evidence law, and things like that. From our assessment, it seems like the most available avenue at the current stage is the ICJ path through Canada. And this is because there's a lot of support for genocide in Canada, whereas on the ICC path, there's a lot of UN dependency. That's not to say it's not possible, but whichever path gets us there first is great. And I think I'll conclude there and take questions if there are any.
மிக்க நன்றி திரு ராஜீவ் ஸ்ரீதரன் அவர்களே. உங்களுடைய இந்த the legal perspective and also the technical perspective of the issue in hand was very clear, and it was very helpful for the audience to understand. And thank you so much for that. And also, especially you brought up you started with a key question on whether the ban was used as a tool for the genocide, which is just a clarity that you brought.
Yeah. If I could, I had so many things in my head, I didn't mention anything. Another quote we got from, this is from a witness reporting what the army said. Ningal Vannila Paranda, Ningal Yekkam. Vannila Paranda, Ningal Yekkam. So right there, you have the logic of the ban applies to every Tamil in Vanni. Right, so.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that clarity and also the key questions. And also you outlined how the overlap between the counter-terrorism and the genocide are taking place. And also you explained very clearly how these no-fire zones are used as equivalent to the gas chambers of hospitals too. And finally, you gave us the technical aspects of the potential legal paths via the International Criminal Court, where we can focus on the individuals, and also the International Court of Justice, where we can focus on the organizations or the state as a whole. Thank you so much for the technical overview. Now, thank you so much, both the speakers, for your wonderful time and effort in putting these materials together. உங்கள் இருவருக்கும் பேரவையின் சார்பாக மனமார்ந்த நன்றிகள். இது பலருக்கும் ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு அவேர்னஸ் கிரியேட் பண்ணியிருக்கும். அடுத்தபடியாக நாம் கேள்வி நேரத்திற்கு செல்லலாம். இந்த கேள்வி நேரத்தை ஒருங்கிணைக்க மருத்துவர் திரு அருள் ரஞ்சிதன் அவர்களை அன்போடு அழைக்கிறேன்.
வணக்கம் கிங்ஸ்லி.
வணக்கம். அந்த கேள்வி நேரத்தை நீங்கள் இப்பொழுது எடுத்துக்கொண்டு நீங்கள் செல்லலாம். ஐயா, நீங்க மியூட்ல இருக்கீங்க. உங்களுடைய
கேக்குதா?
ஆமா.
இப்ப
ஓகே. வணக்கம் கிங்ஸ்லி. Rajeev, excellent presentation. If I open the floor for questions, I also have a couple of questions, but I will have anyone else who has questions to ask Rajeev and Amin Arlanchian, both the presentations. Anyone who has questions, please use this time now.
Can I ask a question? Eelam here.
Oh, go ahead.
So Rajeev mentioned Canada has more political capital to take Sri Lanka to ICJ. So what can we do as diaspora to expedite that process financially or politically?
Can I answer? Yeah. I think Canada, if there's a historical window to break this pattern of injustice going back to Black July, we are currently in it. We are in it. In terms of helping Canada, if you take a first principles approach, if the court case starts next week, you need a legal argument and you need evidence. And so these are things that the diaspora can work on in sort of a collective way. For example, I presented the gas chamber model, right? And other people may agree or disagree. Those are some things like that's something that the diaspora we can sort of collaborate on to figure out collectively what the best argument is. But I think more important to that is we actually have to do more evidence collection. And so before I think the political opportunity is there in Canada, but if Canada files next week, it will need evidence. And there's just too many discrepancies between the UN iNGO reports and what witnesses are saying. And so the next step is, it's some sort of more organized fact-finding evidence collection to basically move the truth from the witness's memory into the public domain. And yeah, if we do that, then I think there's a direct line from Canada to the ICJ.
Rajeev, let me ask you this question. Your Appa was also working with Bruce Fine,
Yeah.
and he collected a lot of information at that time. Is that available to you, or is that
Yeah,
lost?
it's available. I can share that. Now we completed that before 2009. The genocide argument, we completed that before, for example, the no-fire zones, and so it would need to be updated. But it's available.
And
I mean, the
one
history,
other question.
Yeah, all the research that Meena shared is relevant. You know, all the historical context to determine the intent to destroy the Tamil people is the same.
One other question. On the Killing Fields video, they showed how the location of the hospital was given to the government forces, and immediately within half an hour there was bombing.
Yeah. No, it's horrible. So, but this was so if we look at that, it then raises difficult questions on why was the ICRC passing on the information. But the medical component is like denial. So denial of access to medical care. And I didn't have time to get into this, but so the army was, okay, of course, attacking the hospitals. There was drone-based targeting throughout 2009. And so I was surprised to see none of that is mentioned in the UN iNGO reports. So drone-based targeting of hospitals. They also targeted ambulances, and they were targeting roads. And the reason for this is, let's say you're injured in a certain village, right? If the hospital's bombed, the ambulance is bombed, and the road is bombed, you can't actually get there. You can't actually get there. And so I think even from talking to the medical team that was operating till the last day, you could say half the people in Vanni died from direct shelling and half died from just no medicines.